this is the Fingerpaint team. You've met with some of them already, and they're just going to present some tips on interviewing, some skills that can be developed, and then we're going to do some breakout rooms so we can practice some of those tips. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to Crystal.
Thank you so much, Miguel, and hello, everyone. So nice to see you all again. I think it's cool that we're doing this in like a second session from, as a follow-up to that first time that we had with you guys. So I'm Crystal Gamola. I'm head of talent acquisition for the Fingerpaint Group. We are a pharmaceutical advertising company. We handle marketing materials, branding materials, naming. We do it all for our pharma clients and healthcare clients. So we have our P&C, our people and culture team, on the line with us today. Some of us are recruiters, and the other half is from our HR side of the team. They handle things like employee relations, benefits. I mean, literally everything. Everything that, with the exception of hiring, they handle it all. So Katie and Quinn are also on the line joining us. So I'm actually going to pass it over to two people on our team that manage our internship program. They manage our college recruiting program. They do a lot of our entry level hiring. So they're constantly speaking with graduates like yourselves. Gigi Awad and Vanessa Musto are going to take us through a presentation of just some interview tips and tricks, give you guys some advice as to how to handle yourself during an interview. And then we will do our breakout rooms. So let's, Gigi, kick it off.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. Hi, everybody. Like Crystal said, I'm Gigi. I've been at Fingerpaint for about 3 years now, and I've recruited for everything under the sun, from project management to account roles to internships. Actually, that's how I started my career at Fingerpaint, is managing the internship program, which has been very fulfilling to me. So I'm very excited to do this presentation today. Vanessa, I'd love if you could introduce yourself as well, and then we can kick it off.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa Musto. I am, as they have pointed out, I'm a recruiter here at Fingerpaint Group. I've been helping Gigi with the internship recruiting for this year, which has been really rewarding. So we're excited to kind of share a little bit more of what our findings from, interviews and all of that good stuff with you guys.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know once you can see that. Can everybody see that?
We see it.
Okay, awesome. So we'll be going through some interview tips today with the presentation that Vanessa so beautifully put together. So I'll go through some tips, and then at the end, I'll do a Q&A with Vanessa, since she actually started as a Fingerpaint intern. She's been an intern for 2 years and is now converted onto our team. So feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. We are a pretty small group, so I'd love to make this as conversational as possible. So don't hesitate. Okay, so starting off with preparing for your interview. Some of you may have interviewed before. This might be totally new to others, but preparing for your interview is probably one of the most important parts of the interview process. So make sure you research the company that you are going to interview for. Make sure it aligns with your personal and professional goals. Do research on their LinkedIn page and on their actual website and figure out what they're all about. And then second to that is actually researching your interviewers. So make sure you know who you're going to be meeting with. Search them up on LinkedIn, figure out how long they've been at the company, how they started their careers, and how they got to where they are. And if that's something you even want to point out in the interview, that'll be pretty impressive. So say, I see that you have been here for 2 years. How do you like it? How did you start off here? That'll be something that'll stick out in their minds. And then conducting market research on salaries for similar positions. So because most of you, I assume, are New York, New Jersey based, lots of companies are actually expected to post salaries now. So that information should be available to you on LinkedIn and Glassdoor and even salary.com. So, take a look at some of the positions that you're applying for and what expectations you might be able to set in terms of a salary perspective. And then review the job description. Make sure that, I hope before you even applied that you reviewed the job description to make sure it aligns with what you're looking for. But review it again before your interview and try to align it with the experience that you have. So if you see certain key points on the job description, try to relate it back to the experience that you have. So if you see, project management is super essential to this role, talk about how you've managed projects in the past, whether it be even a school project or a volunteer experience, and how you manage your time. So try to make it super specific to the job so that you know what they're looking for. And then prepare answers to common questions like, tell me about yourself. So this is a super vague, loaded question that all interviewers ask. And when they say, tell me about yourself, they don't mean, what town you grew up in and how many siblings you have. They mean, tell me about your college experience and what projects you've worked on and why you're interested in this company. So it's not a specific question, but those are the things that interviewers are looking for when they ask that. And then practice thoughtful responses out loud. Whether you're doing anything, even for this presentation, I practiced it out loud. Take some time to think about the kind of responses that you might like to give so that you can prevent being tongue-tied, or, so that you make sure you don't forget certain points that you want to mention. Okay, any questions on that?
I'd just like to add to the research the company, Gigi mentioned the importance of doing this, and this will help with kind of creating some of your questions that we're going to go through in a couple more slides. But, looking at the company's, culture, their values, think of things that from even their social media, right? So look on their Instagrams and their LinkedIn Life pages, and try to pull things out of those areas that you relate to or that you find very personal. They might have a diversity mission, for example, and that might be something maybe you're part of some diversity groups at school that you are interested in. You can relate that's a question, and that will be part of some of the interview, that could be part of the tell me about yourself, right? You could say something like, I've noticed on your website that you have a DIB initiative. This is something that's really meaningful to me. At school, I was part of this group. This is, I'm really interested in learning more. So make sure you're definitely digging deep into the website, deep into those social medias to find things that really relate and speak to you.
Great points. Okay, moving on to tips for virtual interviews. So I'm sure all, if not most, interviews are happening now virtually, but it's just as important as an in-person interview. So make sure you look the part, regardless of where your interview is taking place. Make sure you look presentable based on the industry that you're interviewing for. And it'll set a good impression, of course. And then test all the technology. So make sure your Wi-Fi is working, make sure the Zoom link works. You can hop in a few minutes early to make sure that your microphone works and things like that. We're all at mercy of technology nowadays. So we got to do the best that we can to try to mitigate those kinds of technical issues from happening. And then try as best you can to take the interview in a quiet, well-lit area with no distractions. So try to go into, an individual room if you can. If you can't, maybe find a library or, some of those small rooms in libraries, if that'll help. Life happens. Sometimes there are dogs barking in the background and kids running around. And if it happens, it's okay to address it in an interview. Say, sorry, please pardon the noise. So don't feel uncomfortable about things like that. It happens. And then try to silence notifications on your phone and laptop. So if you have messaging apps on your laptop, try to quit those so they don't distract you or the interviewer. And then if you can, put your phone in do not disturb mode, or silence it or turn it off completely, just to avoid kind of the buzzing on the desk that everyone can hear.
I'm going to throw this out there. Gigi had a story back, I think it was last summer or the summer before, she interviewed someone, and the person's background, and you don't think it's a big deal, but the person's dorm room that they were interviewing from was very, very messy. Like food containers and garbage and, clothes hanging out of their drawer. And you wouldn't think, like, some people might not think that's a big deal. This person didn't think that was a big deal, but the person on the other end, the one that's interviewing you, could actually pull a lot from that. It goes to the recruiter might think that maybe you're unorganized, maybe your lack of detail, maybe you just don't care, and that could be a concern. So really make sure that your surroundings and whatever is in that back behind you looks neat and tidy, and in a presentable state.
Okay, tips for in-person interviews. So obviously this is different. Things matter more than just torso up. So dress the part head to toe here. Make sure that it's probably going to be a business formal kind of attire based on the industry that you're interviewing at. Try to silence notifications prior to your arrival. Put the phone in your bag or your pocket, turn it off before even arriving so distractions don't happen and you don't feel the tendency to look at your phone if something pops up. And then this is a big one, arrive early and know where you're going. I mean, I've gone to interviews in my past and given like a half hour, 40-minute buffer, and I've still been late because I'm at the mercy of public transportation. So really try to overestimate the amount of time that you'll need. And if you end up arriving 20, 30 minutes early, you can sit at a coffee shop nearby. But that's always a better alternative to being late and leaving a bad impression. Next thing is bring a few hard copies of your resume. I know we're in a super digital world now and everyone probably looked at your resume digitally, but it's important to be able to provide copies so that when you're sitting across from someone, you can hand it over and they can, look at some of your skills pretty quickly. Even if you're only expecting to meet with one person, it's good to bring a couple of copies just in case someone else walks in or they want to hand it to some people from their team. So make sure you always have maybe 2 or 3 resumes. And then shake hands upon meeting your interviews. A strong, confident handshake is never overrated. All right. Moving on to the next slide. So let's talk about during the interview. So if you don't know, 70 to 80% of our language is 70 to 80% of our communication comes from body language. So it's super important to be aware of the cues, even unintentional cues that we may be sending with our body language. So try to be aware of your eye contact. Number 1, look at your interviewer, try not to be distracted and look at things around the room. It can convey that you're not interested in the role. And that's something that you probably don't want to do. And then body language, try to be aware of how you're sitting, try to be aware of, what facial expressions you're doing, try not to fumble around too much, make sure you're, sitting comfortably in your chair and trying not to, do too much. And then enthusiasm, show genuine interest and enthusiasm in the company and in the role and the conversation. It'll show, that stuff shows through interviews. And I mean, hopefully it is something that you're genuinely interested in and that's why you're applying. Another thing is to provide detailed answers. So try to answer each question based on your own experience or goals. Usually, I mean, even if interviewers ask you simple yes or no questions, never answer with just a one-word answer. Try to elaborate on everything you say. Talk about, certain instances. Have ideas actually before you enter the interview of certain examples you'd like to give. They're probably going to ask about a challenge that you came across and how you overcame it and what the result was. So have those examples handy and be ready to talk about, those details in your experiences. Another one is highlighting transferable skills. So this one is interesting in the sense that, a lot of you are probably going to graduate from college soon and some may have not yet. And you might not be able to check off every single thing in a job description. And that's okay. I actually had someone tell me once that if you are checking off everything in a job description, you shouldn't apply because it's not going to challenge you. So there should be things that you don't know how to do. And that's okay. And that's why transferable skills are super important. There's always, maybe a lesson or a situation that you've been in that you can pull from those experiences and try to relate it to the responsibilities that the job is looking for. And then ask questions. Never leave an interview without asking any questions. I think at least have 2 to 3 questions prepared for every interview you're going to. Because it shows curiosity in the team and it shows that you're actually curious about what they're doing. And it leaves a good impression. And it shows that you care.
Going back to
any questions here?
I'll just throw this in there, Gigi. Going back to the transferable skills, it's okay if the recruiter, the hiring manager asks you if you have experience in a certain area. And if the answer is no, it's okay to say, no, I don't have experience there yet, but in college, I was part of this group or I worked on this project. So remember to think about those trends. That's what Gigi means by these transferable skills. Or let's say maybe it's a job. Maybe you worked at a restaurant and you were like, I worked at whatever restaurant, Olive Garden. My job was in making sure that my guests had maybe you're interviewing for a client. Let me just back this up. Maybe you're interviewing for a client service position, account job, and your job is to manage clients, right? Relationships. And the recruiter or the hiring manager asks you, do you have experience in this? Maybe you don't have experience in client and relationship direct client experience as the position might be asking for, but maybe you worked at Olive Garden and your job was to make sure that your customers, clients, were having a great experience. You wanted to make sure that they always had, that their food was appropriate and they had a great time, So think about those transferable things. Think about things that you've done that could show the recruiter or the hiring manager that you might, in this particular case, are customer oriented, and know that how important that is to you. So it's okay to say, I don't have this particular experience. However, working at or interning at this previous position gave me this experience.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Yeah, of course.
Hi,
That's pretty
good to see you again.
This one is like when it comes to like technical questions, what if like you don't know the answer? What would be like the right thing to say?
Yeah.
I can chime in here, guys. I've been recruiting in the technical space for about 16 years, and this is a common thing that I have coached others on. It's very similar to what Gigi and Crystal have already explained. It's like, be honest, but use it as a time to maybe talk about a similar technology or tool that you have used. Get as close as you can, and then maybe back it up by saying, a little bit more, sharing more about a time you did fill a knowledge gap in another way so that you can learn and adapt. That's really the point of how you want to answer that question.
Okay.
Good question. Anybody else have questions while we're here? No? Okay. Awesome. Well, moving on to the salary conversation. So this, I know some people feel uncomfortable about having these conversations, but it really is just a natural exchange of services, right? I mean, you apply to a job to provide a service and they provide a salary. So that, that's kind of the typical exchange. Don't ever feel uncomfortable about having these kinds of conversations. The conversations usually happen with recruiters, not hiring managers. So the person who reached out to you first and had an initial phone screening or phone interview is probably the person who's going to have these salary conversations with you. And based on your market research, share the salary that you're hoping to earn. Do it based on the skills that you can provide to the role, but also the responsibilities that the role require of you. You can also ask what the salary range is and let the recruiter know if you're comfortable with it. And if you're not, tell them why. Your recruiter should be there to be able to support you in those conversations. So be honest with them. And then this is something that not a lot of people think about, but asking about the benefits that the company provides, because this might be able to save you some money and justify an unexpected salary. So for instance, Fingerpaint pays for medical premiums every month for employees and their dependents. So I'm not sure if some of you are paying for healthcare yet, but it's very pricey. Some people have saved $6,000 to $7,000 a year on health insurance, and that's just an individual, not even a family of 3 or 4. So if the role that you're looking for and you're hoping to make $60,000 is only paying $50,000, but they're paying for your healthcare, you're essentially making like $57,000. And those are the numbers that you don't really see on paper. So it's good to kind of look at their benefits, review all the documents, and determine if that makes sense for you, because it's different than the number that you see on paper. Yeah. Similarly, if you love going to the gym and you spend like $1,000 or $2,000 on a gym membership a year, and the company you're applying to offers really good gym reimbursement, you're essentially making $2,000 added onto the salary that it looks like in your offer letter. So try to change your perspective and think about it in those ways, because it can make a big difference. Okay, and then some suggested questions. So I mentioned to have at least 2 to 3 questions prepared for every interview. And these are kind of general questions that really will work for any role. So we can share this deck with you afterwards, and if you want to use it as a reference, feel free to. But also feel free to use Google and ChatGPT now. Type in, what kind of questions should I ask a hiring manager in an interview for so-and-so role? take all those questions and be able to, ask it and change it around a little bit if you need to, based on what the role requires. So these are kind of the 3 checkpoints that are most important to ask about: is your team, the role, and the company. So for the team, ask about what the structure of the team looks like and who you'll be working most closely with. And if you'll have kind of a buddy or a certain manager that will be guiding you through these things, just to give you an idea of the kind of support you'll have in the role. Number 2 is asking about your day-to-day responsibilities. What can I expect in my, what will my day-to-day look like? What will my week-to-week look like? What are maybe monthly goals that I'll be expected to fulfill? And that'll give you an idea of the kind of responsibilities that'll be under your belt. And then number 3 is company. What efforts does the company make to maintain a positive work culture? So like Crystal was saying in the beginning, make sure that, you've done some research on the company culture, and if it aligns with your personal and professional goals, try to take a look at what their mission and their values are. Because that's really where you'll be most successful, is if you're working at a place that aligns with your personal and professional goals. There is a huge difference between a job and a career, and you want to find a career that you feel invested in. So asking all of these questions will help determine if you're going for the right thing. Any questions on this?
The rule of thumb when interviewing, it's 60-40. So think of that number. So 60% of your interview should be coming from you. 60% of the conversation should be coming from the person that's being interviewed. 40% should be coming from questions and conversations from the person on the other end. So if you ever think that you're talking too much or too little, remember that number, and that will help either make you want to, talk a little bit more, ask some more questions, make sure you have more questions ready to go than you may ask, and prioritize them. So Gigi mentioned that you should have questions in each of these buckets. Maybe have a few more jotted down just in case you're not feeling like you're hitting that 60% and that you need to ask a little bit more questions.
Yeah. Okay, so after the interview has been concluded, make sure you send a thank you email to the hiring team. Unfortunately, this has been less and less common. And it's unfortunate because we hear a lot of times from teams that they really expected to get a thank you note from someone and they didn't. And it kind of, gives them a bad taste in their mouth. And I've actually experienced teams that say, if they're debating between 2 candidates of similar experience, they'll say, I kind of want to hire this person who sent a thank you note as opposed to this person who didn't. It'll take less than 5 minutes to send an email. Don't let that be the reason that you don't get the job. And try to make it personal, right? Instead of saying, thanks so much for your time, I appreciate it, take care. Try to take specific moments of your conversation with that person and mention it to them so that you can kind of refresh their memory, in a day or 2 when you send it. So if they went to the same college that you did, say, hey, it was so nice to meet you. It was really nice to see that we went to the same college, or maybe we know the same professor or something. Try to add that little personal touch to all of them. And do try to email all the interviewers that you met with. So if you had like a panel of 3, try to email them separately and mention 3 separate things.
I was just gonna say that, Gigi. I remember a hiring manager being like, yeah, they sent us all the same thank you notes. They sent a thank you note, but it was all the same thank you note. And you'd be surprised, you're like, wait a second, it's in a thank you note, but they remember these things. So like Gigi said, find something personal to put in that thank you note to them.
Yeah. And then finally, you can follow up with your recruiter about next steps. So, give them a call, shoot them a message afterwards, let them know how the interview went, and ask them when you can expect to hear back on next steps. And then here are kind of some situations that happen, right? Let's say you're interviewing with a couple of different companies and one company B has offered you a job, but you really want to work with company A. You can tell the recruiter at company A, hey, I got a job offer, but you guys are my first choice. Let me know if there's anything we can do to expedite this process, or, let me know when I can expect to hear back. Because if company A really wants to hire you, they're going to do the best that they can to expedite that process so that they can give you an answer or hire you if that's what they'd like to do. So be transparent about that. I know some people feel awkward about telling them, I've got another job, but don't feel awkward about that. It helps the recruiter move the process along appropriately if they need to. All right.
And I'm just going to throw this out there too. The
Yeah.
recruiter that you work with at your first company, keep in touch with them throughout the years, because you never know when you might actually run into them again, or somewhere along your line, they might have moved to a different company and now you're 3-4 years down the line and you're looking for a new opportunity. Like, cherish that relationship and don't be afraid to reach out to them in the future. I can't tell you how many people I've hired from people like you just graduating, and then I've hired them 2-3 times over at various companies, just because we've kept in touch and we've had a really great communication.
Yeah, I love hearing back from older candidates. All right, so jumping into our Q&A portion. So Vanessa, like I mentioned, started off as an intern here. And so we thought it would be really helpful for her to share some of her personal experiences with searching for jobs and her interview process. So I'm going to ask some questions to Vanessa and then I'll kind of let her answer them. So Vanessa, first off, how did you find an internship?
Yeah, great question, Gigi. So specifically for the Fingerpaint internship, that was my most recent internship. I had a friend of my sister tell me about Fingerpaint. I was just, about to graduate, and I was telling her kind of my aspirations, and she had said, my company is really great. We have a people and culture team. We have an internship program. Do you want me to refer you? And it was just a casual conversation that turned into something very serious. So definitely capitalize on any kind of personal connections. That is, you might have heard this. You've probably heard this from your professors, from, people in the workforce already. Connections are how you get your foot in the door in companies, the number one way, at least in my experience. And along with that, when I was an undergrad, before I interned with Fingerpaint, I also had 3 other internships, which were not nearly as awesome. Love Fingerpaint. But I got all of those from career fairs. So if you have the opportunity to attend career fairs and actually network with recruiters or current employees at certain companies, you're already doing this sort of, I guess you can kind of say, almost an informal interview where you're actually presenting yourself and you're giving them your resume, you're shaking their hand, you're meeting them, they're remembering you. And, you can apply in the future, say, hey, we met at this career fair and I see you have an opening now. And that's a really good way to get your foot in the door as well. So those personal connections, any kind that you can make, any kind of networking you can do is really huge.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Actually, my first ever internship happened because I attended a career fair and met their CEO, and he remembered my name. It's really easy to get lost in a sea of resumes, but if you make a personal connection and shake someone's hand and get to see them face to face, it makes a much bigger impact. So take advantage of that as much as you can. Okay, number 2, Vanessa, how did you prep for your interviews?
Yeah, so basically everything that we went through in the PowerPoint I followed that religiously. When prepping for interviews, I made it like a job. Just because there was so much background information that goes into having a successful interview. So regardless of what you think you know about the company or what you do know about the company or who you know at the company, you do need to know the basics of what they do, what kind of services they offer, what products they're selling, who their clientele is. You need to know these things. And it also helps to know what their employees are saying about working there, what kind of jobs they have there, just so you can kind of, ask these questions like what's the company size, things like that. So definitely do some background info, research on the company itself. You don't want to walk into the interview and say something thinking that it's what the company does and then having that be totally wrong. A week ago, one of the internship candidates at Fingerpaint thought we were a medical device company, and she was dismissed from the hiring team because we don't do medical devices, we do pharmaceutical advertising. So it just showed that she didn't really have a full grasp on what we were doing as a company. So that definitely goes a long way. Just know your stuff and know what the company actually does. Another thing that we mentioned was researching your interviewers. That can go a really long way. If you look them up on LinkedIn and then somehow, even sometimes you might find a personal connection with them saying, oh, I see you have a background in retail. I worked at this store when I was in high school as well, something like that, something that can be personal. That's just always a conversational piece. And a lot of interviewing is having a very fluid conversation and making some personal connections. So you definitely want to find some of those. And even if you can't, it doesn't hurt to, you know, formulate some questions based on your recruiter's or your hiring manager's background. And then another huge thing was just practicing that answer to the tell me about yourself question or whatever version of that they ask. They called it when I was in undergraduate, they called it elevator pitch. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but that's essentially what that question is. It's, you know, pretty basic formula. Just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background, and talk about why you're interested in this role specifically. So definitely practice that quite a bit.
Great points.
Answer, yeah.
Okay. What were some typical interview questions that were asked of you?
Yeah, so obviously there was the dreaded yet somehow loved tell me about yourself, or whatever version of that they are going to ask. They asked if I was familiar with the company before applying for the job. Totally okay to say that you have not. You can show that you've done some research, you know, after you applied for the job or after you found the job listing, stuff like that. They asked, you know, why I chose my major and why I'm pursuing the career path that I'm pursuing. So definitely have some knowledgeable and thoughtful answers behind that. And as I'm sure you do, it's a very personal question. They asked, you know, why I was interested in the role and the company specifically. So again, find those connections to the company, find reasons why you want to work there, as well as reviewing the job description. Just know what you're going to be doing in this role and know that that's actually something you want to do. It will genuinely show in your responses that it's something that you feel passionate about versus something that you're just applying to apply. And then a big thing that we ask at Fingerpaint is why the industry interests people. It's not one of the most common industries. Pharmaceutical advertising is not something you hear every day. So we hear a lot of different answers. Sometimes, you know, the people who answer and say, I never thought about it. I was never really interested in it before, you know, I heard back from you and applied for this job, versus the people who say, wow, healthcare it means so many things to many different people. Everybody needs it. Everybody has, you know, things that they're worried about, you know, health-wise at some point in their life. And it's really great to contribute to something bigger than myself. And those answers are very starkly different. So definitely find reasons why, even if you're not applying for a role in this industry specifically, that's just an example, but find reasons why you're interested in the specific industry, because it definitely shows when you feel connected to it.
Yeah. Awesome. And then final question, how did you decide if a company was right for you, or if it aligned with your personal and professional goals?
Yeah, that definitely goes back to a lot of the background research that I did prior to interviewing, prior to even applying. There's some companies where you can really tell the culture based on their online presence, whether that's LinkedIn, social media pages, even just like Glassdoor reviews from, you know, employees, things like that. You can really get a sense of what the company is all about and what it's like to actually be within that company. So you can see in like recruiting advertisements that you might come across on LinkedIn or on their career websites or on their general website. Pay attention to like the tone of voice that they're using in their language, the visuals that they're, you know, showing. Obviously, a lot of them this day and age are stock photos, but they still have to align with a certain, you know, vision of the brand. So obviously review their general information, how they describe themselves. You can tell with a certain tone of voice if they're witty, if they're like fun and creative, if that's the kind of place you want to be at, awesome. If it's more of like a suit and tie, very buttoned up, super professional type of place, and you want that, great. You can tell from their presence online for sure. Also, as they were saying before, look into their vision and mission, and if they have, employee resource groups or any kind of diversity committees, or any kind of employee engagement opportunities, like volunteering and philanthropy. Look at those things and see, what matters to you matters to the company as well. I think I see a question.
Yes.
Couple questions here.
Oh,
Yeah, Sebastian wrote in the chat, and Sebastian, correct me if I'm wrong. He said, "What are your go-to topics to say when it comes to a career fair?" So I guess when you approach a career fair, what are some things that you can break the ice or start conversation? I think that's where you're getting at, Sebastian. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Gigi, you want me to take this?
Yeah, if you have so what students will ask the companies at the career fair?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
what
like
if,
if you,
I'm
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
But like so like when you're approaching like a recruiter in a career fair, like what would you like say? Like
Yeah.
what would be the first thing you would talk about?
Sure. So first, have an idea of what your elevator pitch is going to be, because they're certainly going to ask you what you study and what made you chose that and why you're interested in their company. I think a great first thing to say is, I saw your company online, or I did some research on it. I'm really interested to know more. So you don't have to know everything about the company entering it. You should have at least an idea of what they do, and if it's something that interests you, and then have them elaborate, and that's totally fine. Another thing is asking about opportunities, if they have any internships or full-time jobs that are currently available. And then make sure you have maybe one or two questions about kind of the industry and how it aligns with what you're doing. Let's say you're, in public relations. Say, do you have any, business development or public relation opportunities available? Because I'd love to do something like that. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
And come
Awesome.
ready with
Yeah.
resumes and handshakes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. From my experience with career fairs, you walk up to me, you give me your hand, you introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Sebastian. This is my major, and I'm actually looking for blank. I'm looking for a summer internship. That's like the best three things you can do: handshake, name, major. What do you guys have internships available? And then that way I know off the bat, okay, where to direct you or where to send you, what to offer you. So that's great advice.
Yeah. So I think we have one more question. Tim?
Yes, that's me. Yeah, my question is kind of bouncing off of question 4 from the Q&A. And I guess to give a bit of background, most companies, at least if they're like semi-decent, would have some sort of team who's in charge of kind of controlling their public image to some extent, right? So then sometimes it's if there's like, you might run into a situation where kind of the company's preaching something, but they're not necessarily practicing it. So like, what are some red flags that you would like, that you should look out for in interviews that should let you know that this company might not be like, there might be a few things that they aren't saying to you, or there's a few kind of expectations which may not align with their goals, but that are not being kind of shared with you. How would you look for that?
That's a really great question. It is sometimes difficult to assess that without having actually worked at a company. I've applied to companies that have, preached people first, and you get there and you just kind of feel like a number. So I totally understand that it's difficult to decipher that. I think a great way of determining that is asking about how they maintain their company culture. If they mention actual specific events that they do. Maybe they do philanthropic events, or maybe they have, like Vanessa mentioned, employee resource groups. Or if they, put effort into recognizing their employees, or they have awards, or anything that makes it so that they want people to stand out. I think those are things that you can take notice of. If they say, yeah, we have a great company culture, we love to collaborate together. That if it's vague enough that you haven't really walked away with any specific information, maybe that's a red flag. But if they have specific examples that they're sharing with you, that's probably a better bet. If anyone has an answer too for that.
Also, look on their LinkedIn Live pages. Not every company might have a LinkedIn Live page, but a lot of the big ones do. So if you go to a company's LinkedIn page, there'll be a tab that says Life. And there is where usually employees will post pictures, have testimonials, they share things. It's a little bit less managed by more of a PR outwardly than it is more so kind of like, I guess like real stuff. I feel like more like genuine. Like for example, Vanessa runs our LinkedIn Live page here, and she will gather if there's an event going on, she'll reach out to the people that did the event and she'll post it. She'll get testimonials from people, interns or whatnot. So that is kind of a very authentic, I think, way of looking at how the culture is. And I'm also going to throw out Glassdoor with a grain of salt, because I think Glassdoor is good in so many ways because there are real people that have worked for a company that can actually give feedback on their experience of how it was working for that company, similar to like a Yelp. But at the same time, most people like to complain than say good things. That's why I say the grain of salt piece of it. You're going to find more people. If you go to a restaurant and the restaurant's a bad experience, you're going to find more people complain about that restaurant than say that restaurant was awesome. So take it with a grain of salt, but there is some authenticity about that too that you can find through Glassdoor reviews.
Yeah. I'll add something real quick. I mean, you could ask the person you're speaking with what they love most about working there and sit back and listen to how they respond. That could tell you a lot. If you happen to be in person meeting the company, look around the office. You know, how are other people interacting with each other? Are they smiling and laughing, or do they all look miserable? Like that energy will tell you a lot.
I also, just to chime in, the more people that you can speak to, like, don't just have one interview, but maybe have like 2 or 3 and just see, what their different perspectives are. And if there's some consistency with what people are saying, I think that's really important. And you'll get that, it comes across as far as their personality as well. So I think it's good to have a couple of people that you're meeting with at least.
Oh, and I'm going to throw out there, people love to talk about themselves. And just while we're interviewing while the recruiters or the hiring managers are interviewing the candidates and we want to get to know about the candidates, it's your job to also get to know about us. So make sure you're asking, like, how did you get started in your career? Right? Like, and people love talking about themselves, and you're going to make the person feel real good, right? If to be able to talk to you about how they got started in their career, how they got started at Fingerpaint. How did you get started at Fingerpaint? What was your first job like? And so having the other person, that's a way for you to get to know them. That will help with those thank you notes. That will help kind of figuring out more of the culture and making sure that's aligned with you. But it also gets them talking and excited about you.
Right. Any more questions? We left some few minutes.
Yeah, I had a question about just like following up after an interview. Does it matter if you send a thank you note like through email or through this like a LinkedIn message, or is one or the other better? Or like how long should you take before sending a thank you note?
I think an email is better. Feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn, absolutely. But ask the recruiter for their email address afterwards, because then it shows that you put in a little extra effort to get their email address so that you can send it to them a little bit more personally.
And send it immediately. I would say if the same day, if you can, max the next day. But if you can do it the same day, that would be ideal. It'll show the recruiter and the hiring manager how like you're super excited about this.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Real quick, Miguel, if anybody needs any of our contacts, want to talk personally with Gigi, anybody on the team, feel free to reach out to Miguel, and happy to share all of our contacts with anybody.
Thank you guys for your time. Students, please, share some of your feedback with me. You can shoot me a text or an email about what you thought about the workshop and your breakout rooms. We would love to hear your feedback. Crystal and team, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. And again, fellows, I'll see you next month when we do the next workshop, and I'll send you some email reminders about that as well. All right, guys.
Thanks,
Enjoy
everybody.
the rest of your week.
Take
Enjoy
care.
your weekend.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.